Welcome to the Doggy Dojo. I'm your host, Susan Light, a Los Angeles-based dog trainer and behavior consultant on a quest to become worthy of the title Sensei of the Doggy Dojo. Today we're talking about what is sure to become a go-to book for pet parents who are not really sure where to get started. There are not a lot of good dog training books that are accessible to the average person, that gives a good overview and practical advice on how to get started. So I'm really excited about this as a resource for people who either can't afford to work with a trainer or want a reference to keep around. My guest is a journalist, certified dog trainer, and the owner of School for the Dogs in Manhattan's East Village. Her book, How to Train Your Dog with Love and Science, is out now, and she also co-hosts a podcast of the same name. Please welcome Annie Grossman. Annie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And congratulations on your book.
Aw, thanks.
How does it feel?
Oh my God, I am just over the moon happy.
You said that this is the book you wish you'd had when you got your first dog. I'd love to hear a little bit about that journey with that dog.
Yeah, well, I don't say that because, a lot of people I know became trainers because they had dogs who had problems and they were looking for a solution and were lucky enough to, or sometimes they weren't lucky enough to find positive reinforcement training, but somehow made their way to the wonderful world of positive reinforcement training, or whatever you want to call it. Good dog training is what I like to call it.
Yeah.
And, but that wasn't really my story. I honestly, was one of those people. I always liked dogs. I remember like a teenager in high school going to people's houses for like ragers, and I'd be like in the corner whispering to the dog.
For sure.
Hold my beer. And I just always liked doing tricks with my dog. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, but like, I taught him to go through my arms in a circle. And then I had a dog who I did a little bit of therapy work with when I was little bit, but like, I'm talking like the early 90s, and I was like, in middle school, and it just wasn't something that it never really occurred to me that like, oh, I could grow up and be a dog trainer.
Sure.
If anything, people would be like, you like pets, you should be a vet. And I was like, I don't think I could ever do that. I was a dog walker, actually, also like from middle school on. I think people shouldn't hire middle school dog walkers, but
yeah, that's tough. The whole like side gig dog walker, that's a whole other podcast episode. But
I was a New York City dog walker at 10 years old, charging $1 a walk in 1990. And so I was just always really crazy about dogs, but never imagined a career where I could get to work with dogs at all. But I guess it was like, I was trying to figure out what I could do that was like, I don't know, like a vocation. Like I was working as a journalist for like from college throughout my 20s, and I loved it, but it was just like, I started out on staff at newspapers, and then I went freelance, which was wonderful in so many ways, but really hard to piece together a living, and having to pitch constantly and sell myself constantly, and I just felt like I need to do something more straightforward with my life. I can't deal with this kind of lifestyle. But I knew I needed to do something working for myself. I think it's my personality. And I also really wanted to figure out something that would be fun.
Yeah.
I would enjoy doing. So I literally was like making lists of like, what are things that I like to do that I could do for money, maybe. And one day at the dog park, I would bring my dog, then my dog Amos, who was this wonderful little Yorkie poo. He was just like my best buddy. I would bring him to the park and like write lists of like things that I could imagine doing with my life. And one day I met a guy at the dog park whose father had just graduated from Karen Pryor Academy, and it really piqued my interest. And I was like, oh, maybe I could be a dog trainer. Like maybe like that's a thing. I didn't really know any dog trainers. Like the only dog training class I had been to was with my dog, and it wasn't anything that like left any kind of good impression. It was basically just somebody walking around like shooting the puppies with like water. And but I mean, at the time, I didn't even think. I was like, that's just what dogs That's just
We
what
don't
dog
know.
training is.
We don't know. Yeah.
I had no clue. And so when I signed up to go to Karen Pryor Academy, like I knew it had to do with like clicker training, and I like had read, I think I read Don't Shoot the Dog before I went, and I read Reaching the Animal Mind. Reaching the Animal Mind. Those are both Karen Pryor books. So I had some idea before I started, but I think when I signed up, I really had no clue what I was getting into. Like I could have gone in and they could have been like, you know, here's your shock collar and here's your whip. And I would have been like, oh, okay. I mean, I can't imagine it would have like appealed to me.
Right.
Also, don't think I would have thought twice. I would have just been like, this is how you train dogs.
And I think that's how a lot of balanced people get into it, is how it's presented to them.
Yeah.
And like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And which I can understand. Like if that's like your norm, then, you know, I could see how, you know, I guess you want to call it the camp I'm in seems like the fluffy snowflake, you know, kind of like peace, love, hearts and harmony people. You there?
I'm here.
Okay.
I heard that chime. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, I don't know what it was either.
You have an email.
But yeah, I was really lucky in that I found Karen Pryor Academy, and so that's really sort of where I started and how I got into it.
Yeah, but I love that, and I think that's what's so great about your book, because there are a lot of books about dog training out there, but none really that I tend to recommend to my clients beyond like doggy language is probably the number one thing that I'm, you know, telling clients to get so they can learn canine body language. But it's like the Karen Pryor books are very, they're awesome, but they're not really going to explain it to my clients in the way that they want it, if that makes sense. So I think it's great to have this resource. I'm really excited. That's just kind of like front to back. Here's accessible for your average dog lover, dog owner.
Yeah. Person. I mean, I tried to focus sort of on, I guess there's sort of four big things in the book. One is, and one is body language, because I think it's huge. Really, it's huge. It's huge. And it's not hard, I think, to recognize just a little bit about your dog that is going to help you understand if they're comfortable or not.
Yeah.
I mean,
thank you for putting that in. I talk about body language so much on the show because I think would improve animal welfare the more than anything if people could read body language. Yeah. Because people do not understand how stressed the dogs are in these videos they're watching.
And it's something that I think is really not hard to learn.
Yeah.
You know, we at School for the Dogs, my business, we run these off leash sessions that are 40 minutes. They're like kind of like a private dog run, but they're always trainer supervised. And actually, I think they're 45 minutes, whatever. they're always trainer supervised. And I think, like, God, what an education these people are getting, because they get to spend 45 minutes with a trainer who's basically narrating the whole thing. I mean, that might, you know, one or two sessions like that might be all you need in order to kind of like help train your eye. Yeah. And a good book. My way into talking about body language in the book is actually looking at The Dog Whisperer. And I specifically look at one episode, which I kind of picked at random. One of the episodes where he gets bitten by this big, like yellow lab. I think she is named Holly, and I just kind of narrate what's happening as I see it, which of course is not at all how Cesar Milan sees it, which is why he gets bit.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, all of this stuff I think is really important and not that hard to learn. And you know what I'm hopeful about the book. I mean, it takes a little bit to read a book, but it's not a big investment. So I'm hopeful.
And dog training can be expensive, right? Like classes are probably more accessible than privates, but even that, it's like $150 for the cheapest class that I know of in my area. So I'm sure the book is a lot less than that.
It's a lot less than that. No, it is really expensive, and that's really too bad. The good news is that I think to be totally honest, I think part of the reason it's so expensive is because so few people know very much about it. So that expertise, is incredibly valuable. What I hope is that people can get, like, my book can help people like get started on the right foot and know what to look for. So before they're spending, $200 an hour on a trainer that's really making things worse and stressing out their dog, they can be better consumers and, find a trainer who is more aligned with them ethically. And I certainly have my own code of ethics about dog training that I know is going to be different than other people's. But in my book, I call it like, you got to figure out what good dog training is for you. Like I actually write out like, this is what I think good dog training is. And there's like a pledge in the book that you can sign if your values and ethics align with mine, which they may not. But if they don't, I think you still just need to be able to outline your thoughts and your feelings and your priorities. Yeah. Otherwise, it's too easy to just be swayed by whoever says like,
absolutely.
Boo.
It's like you said, whatever your first exposure is if you're not really critically thinking about it, you're just probably going to accept. So if your first exposure happens to be an awesome, positive reinforcement trainer, great. If it ends up being somebody like the dog whisperer, maybe not so great. It is good to really think about what we're actually doing as opposed to just blindly accepting what these people are saying in an unregulated industry. I'll say again,
completely unregulated. No, I wish I'd had this book before I got my first like dog as an adult, but I really wish I'd had this book when I was like, I don't know, 14, 16. I mean, I didn't write it for that age group, but it's certainly at a reading level that a high schooler could handle. And I think it would have changed my life if I had read, even if I had read something like Don't Shoot the Dog, which is Karen Pryor's book from 1984 about how to understand positive conditioning. How to understand conditioning, operant conditioning, and positive reinforcement. And it's really it's not about dogs. I think, but for me, that was a life-changing book, as was Culture Clash. Yeah. And that's another kind of like big picture book by Jean Donaldson. That one's from, I think like 1996, maybe. Those are both just like readable books that I think, kids could, not little kids, but like older kids could get into. And that's kind of like what I was aiming for, was to create a book like one of those that's like you want to like sit down and read it, read each page, not like flip to the part about house training, to try and get people's attention about how amazing the science of behavior is, because that's something that I think like as a nerdy 16-year-old, I like would have gotten me excited. It would have probably made me honestly like lead my life differently, rather than being like the victim of the environment and choices, being a little bit more thoughtful about how to like, create the best world for myself and others. And of course I do wish I'd had it before I got my first dog, because I did some things that I think were really awful to him now when I look back at it, that I think
everybody has that. Yeah. Regret in their past. Do you know what I mean?
He was fortunately, I certainly, he was just such a wonderful, resilient, smart, happy guy. Like many dogs, like I think he let me get away with it. And I never did anything like super traumatic, but I certainly like alpha rolled him and yelled at him and stuff. But like my current dog is like, such a little a little sensitive soul. Like, one scary experience will take her, could take her months to get over, if not longer than that. So I was lucky to have a dog who allowed me some grace in that area, and I'm glad I know better now with my current dog.
Pick up a copy of Annie's book, How to Train Your Dog with Love and Science, anywhere books are sold. And you can check out her podcast, also called How to Train Your Dog with Love and Science, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you live in New York City, check out her website, schoolforthedogs.com. We'll be right back. So I'm sorry, because I interrupted you when you were saying there was 4 major sections of the book, and the first was body language, because I just got so excited about teaching body language, because when I didn't do Karen Pryor. I went through Animal Behavior College to get my first certification, and they don't touch on body language at all. Like I I would definitely recommend Between the Two, Karen Pryor, because it's, more positive focused and more
there's nothing
hands-on.
about body language in that.
Yeah, so it's like we're not teaching even professional trainers about body language, which I think is really interesting. And to me, it's one of the first things I try to teach my clients, because everything else, especially with these sensitive dogs, it's really important to understand where they are. So, so I got so excited about that. But tell me about the other 3 sections as well, please.
Yeah, well, so the first section is just kind of like a big picture meditation on like, that's oxymoronic, like a meditation on this sort of big idea of dogs in our world and how oxymoronic it is. On the one hand, they're our best friends and our furry children, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other hand, there's this storyline of how they're like trying to dominate us and we need to exert our will on them. And I sort of trace my own family's history of dog training, sort of figuring out that how my father learned how to train dogs and how I kind of inherited just his, like, saw it on TV approach. Then I go into talking about operant conditioning and classical conditioning, and how we can understand the ways that dogs learn through the lens of the science of behavior. And I actually, what I ended up doing was sort of telling the story of the history of the science of behavior from, I actually go as far back as Descartes in the 1600s, to Pavlov in the late 1900s, to Thorndike and Watson, and then Skinner in the mid 1900s, to kind of have it be a little bit more character driven, and talking about how it developed, how what Skinner did very much related to what Pavlov did, what Pavlov was doing. He sort of had Descartes in his mind the whole time, and how we can understand these concepts from the science very simply by thinking about how we learn, specifically how we learn by association and how we learn by consequence. Yeah. And how when you start to realize that all of learning is really either, I mean, it's in both of those categories, but you want to sort of focus on one or another at a time, you can better understand what reinforcement is, what punishment is, and what is actually happening when we choose to do the things we choose to do.
Yeah, super important.
And it's replete with many just like examples from working with dogs, but also just from anecdotes of my own life, of how I've changed my behavior and the behavior of others around me by
behavior science is so fascinating. The more I study it, it's just it, and the more I'm always studying it from like the dog perspective, but we all learn the same way. So it makes me understand more about like myself and the decisions I make sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. And I really like to start from the point of view of like, look at all that we have in common with dogs. Whereas I think for most of the 100-ish years that people have been training pet dogs, very much the opposite has been the case. This is human psychology is here and dog psychology is there, and the dog brain works this way and the human brain works that way. But when you think about it, we have way more in common than we don't have in common. I mean, just the fact that like we're mammals living in the same climate, sleeping in the same bed, eating roughly the same food. I mean, compared to many animals out there, we are a lot alike, and certainly the way that we learn is part of the way that we are very, 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 very much alike.
Yeah. And then what's the 4th section?
The 4th section is what is about. Actually, I have to look now. I forget now. Is it actually? Did I actually? Let me look at the part 1. All right, it's 4 sections in my brain right now, but when I actually look at the contents, I realize the sections that I thought of are not the actual sections. So whatever, there's a bunch of sections. The first one is, how we are with dogs, how we got to this weird place. The second section really breaks down the science. The third section, and again, these don't align with the table of contents, but roughly, the third section is about what I call the training triad, which essentially is thinking about all the many, many ways that environment is affecting behavior. And I break that down into 3 elements. One is management, like how can we literally manage our dog's world with baby gates or crates or, muzzles if necessary, the toys that we give to them, the fences we put up, like how can we set the stage from the outside in without for the dog at hand, without like trying to go in and like change the wiring of the brain, because environment does control behavior, and it's
absolutely
it's like the least invasive way to change behavior most of the time. After that, I talk about rewards and how you really need to figure out what is rewarding to your dog, whether that's food or play or maybe distance. And once you figure out what's rewarding, you need to think about the third part of it, which is timing. Like how can you have this like perfectly set stage, you have oodles of the things your dog wants or needs, and then the third part is, okay, how can you on that perfectly set stage give those rewarding things with the right timing so that you're encouraging the behaviors that you want specifically. And that's where, clicker training and a conversation about marker reward training comes in.
I think people are always a little bit surprised how much there is that you should go over before you get to the actual, in air quotes, training exercise itself. But all that is so important to success.
Yeah.
Behavior change.
Yeah. I mean, I really think it's a fault of our school system that classical conditioning and operant conditioning aren't taught, because people could, it's something I think kids could learn about when they're studying, biology. And I don't think it would take more than a few hours of coursework. But although maybe they don't want people to learn it because they don't want the citizens to know how their behavior is being manipulated. But yeah, I find I have to sort of give a quick education on that oftentimes when I'm first seeing a client, which I know is something a lot of trainers don't do because they don't want to talk about the science part of it. But
I do.
I found that and so I'm hoping the book can be a shortcut for that, because if you read the book before my session, then I don't have to spend half an hour explaining these concepts or this part of science that was left out of their education. The reason that I have always included that in my sessions is because for me it really helped just everything fall into place. It's not like you need to know this and there's going to be a quiz. It's like you need to know this because it's really going to help you just get clarity on what the hell is going on.
Yep.
So
understand what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, behavior is not some random thing that is completely unpredictable. I mean, you point out to someone how many things that you could tell them about their day that you didn't even saw. I know you probably got up, probably brushed your teeth, you ate something, you sat at your table, there's so many things that can be predicted. And as a dog owner, once you start to see that, you can, really take control in a way that's good. The word control often is kind of thought of as nefarious, but I think as dog owners, we can be controlling our dogs' lives in a way that makes them happy, ideally.
Yeah, totally. And I love the title, all wrapped up, to coming down to love and science, because there's so much rhetoric about the terminology that's used. I'm sure in multiple industries, but in our industry, there's so much arguments about is it force free? Is it fear free? Is it blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it's hard to know what to say to convey the meaning, like you're saying, that good dog training? Why does it come down to love and science?
Oh, that's a good question. I think because what we're doing, or certainly what we're doing is rooted in the science of behavior, but essentially what I call good dog training, or clicker training more specifically, maybe you'd say, is a technology of that science. It's a technology that helps us train impactfully, effectively, with positive reinforcement. And coincidentally, it's also really fun. It's also something animals like. It's something that, like, by definition, your learner is going to want to come back for more. And it feels like love. And how lucky that, like, these animals that we love can be trained this way, as opposed to what we have been taught for so long, which is like, you love your dog, but you also better make sure that he's not going to try and overtake you and become the head of the household. So you better, walk through the door first and wash your hands in his dog food before he eats it, and, like, hold his mouth shut if he growls at you. But I know you love him. Like, so it's so confusing. And also I think part of, like, loving your dog is accepting, like, their dogginess. Like, they, think about the perfect dog, like the Lassie dog is, like, basically like a human in a dog body doing, doing all, like, knowing all the things a human would know. And that's not what I want for my dog. Like, I don't want a dog who has human intelligence. I want
definitely
her.
Not.
Yeah. So
everyone thinks they want a smart dog until they get one.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, people always say, like, can you really train an old dog new tricks? It's like, often the older ones are the smarter ones. Like, often the older ones are smarter even if you haven't done any training, because, like, they've been learning the whole time and they have figured shit out without, even if you haven't been there trying to help them, sort this from that. They've been doing it all along. So,
yeah. So I have time for one more question. What's the best nugget / takeaway advice that we can leave our listeners with from your book?
One is to think about associations before you think about other stuff. When in doubt, think about how your dog is feeling about something and how you can make them feel better about that thing. If you're worried that you are going to reinforce fear, don't. That's not a thing. Think about how you can change the emotions, because by changing the emotions, we can often change the behavior. And as opposed to taking the top-down approach, which can, I think, frequently make a dog be more fearful, but presenting the behavior that we want possibly less. But that's not really solving the problem, and it can lead to other problems.
100%.
The other, if I'm going to give, like, a quick tip, I talk about it a lot in the book. I talk about it a lot in the book. I love the treat and train. Do you use a treat and train ever?
I kind of want one, and I haven't pulled the trigger.
I talk about its history in the book. It was developed by the late Dr. Sophia Yin, originally for originally for Sharper Image magazine. They funded her to do research on it, and it's a genius little device that's pinpoints the moment your dog is doing something right, and then dispenses a treat from this little, like, R2D2 looking thing that sits on the floor, and you can use a, like, battery operated remote. It's not super fancy. There's no, like, camera or Wi-Fi, but, like, you don't even need it. And I use my treat and train, like, every single day, especially having little kids. I find it's invaluable to be able to like, have, like, this, give my dog basically her dinner in a push button treat dispenser. It's a fabulous little device.
I'm gonna get one. It's been sitting in my cart for a really long time, and I'm like, will I use it? Will I use it?
We do carry. I have an online store for the dogs.
Okay.
Yeah, storeforthedogs.com. We do carry it there. I don't know if the price is better there on Amazon, but it doesn't matter where you buy it. I think you should definitely get one. And there are other devices out there. I've tested a lot of them. I haven't found one that I like better yet. Although they're, like I said, they're ones that like do more things, but sometimes you just want the simple thing, you know. Yeah. Do one thing and do it well. It also comes with a really great guidebook on how to use it. That makes a lot of sense. And it was written by Dr. Yin.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And congratulations again on the book.
Thank you.
Thank you for stopping by the dojo this week. This is your aspiring sensei, Susan Light, signing off. You can find me at doggydojopodcast.com, or I'm Susan Light LA on Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook. The music was written by MacLight. You can find him at maclightsongwriter.com. If you like the show, you can support it by subscribing, sharing it with your friends, rating it, and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts. Just a reminder, this podcast is intended for educational purposes only and does not constitute advice or professional services by either the host or any of the guests. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another new episode of the Doggy Dojo.